Hi, I'm Kelly with Four Legs Up Barbecue, Kelly's Barbecue Seasonings, and K4L Drum Cookers. In today's video, we're going to talk about some tips to help you run your K4L Drum Cooker. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to talk about is our flame diffuser. I always run the flame diffuser here on the top set of pegs in the bottom half, right there. Gives a lot more room to breathe, gives a lot more room to get that air from the air intakes into the fire and coming up. I don't ever run it down there on that second set of pegs. I think it's too close to the fire. It just needs to get some room to get that air moving up before it hits that flame diffuser. So run it on the top set of pegs. The other thing about the flame diffuser is keep it clean. Of course, all your grease is dripping on there. If you switch from one meat to another, if you don't burn it off or maybe you scrape it off or whatever, that flavor might get across into your next cook if that bothers you. Most of the time that doesn't bother me. But what else happens is this carbon stuff here can build up, especially around the center where that's where most of your cooking is. And if it builds up enough to plug these narrow openings right here, as you can see maybe in that one right there, it's starting to plug up just a little bit because of that burnt carbon. Make sure you get that stuff cleaned off, otherwise the center gets plugged up. Now all our heat's coming around on the outside. If you want to know how to do that, I'd say burn them off, take them to the car wash, scrape them, whatever. I just use a scraper if I'm not going to the car wash for a little while, and scrape all that stuff off, scrape it down the bottom, and then vacuum it up with the oil soak. You might want to take a look at our video on how to clean your K4L Drum Cooker when you use an oil soak. It goes into that a lot more. So the next thing we're going to talk about is our latch. First thing to talk about there, when you opened the box of with your K4L Drum Cooker, this might have been bent out just a little bit, come out from the holes. Maybe the bail was clear gone. Find it in the package. Get your trusty pair of pliers out. Get them on there like that. Squeeze it back in the hole. That's all you got to do. That fixes that. The latch is really put on here to keep the lid tight when you're moving the drum cooker around because the handle is on the lid. So you can move it around, do whatever you want to do. I load it in the trailer that way all the time from the car wash. That's what the latch is on there for in the first place. The latch was never designed to be used when you're cooking. So leave the latch open and just go to cooking. Sometimes I have noticed this front of the drum maybe sets up just a little bit. If it's not leaking smoke or heat between the seal and the flange, don't worry about it. You still don't need to latch that. If it's held up enough that you are getting some leakage around that seal, still don't use the latch. That's when it's time to adjust the hinge on the back. So what you want to do then at that point is loosen probably a set of those screws, raise the back of the lid up, drop the front of the lid down a little bit, and tighten everything back up again. So hopefully that answers what the latch was for. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the screws. All the screws in the package when you get your K4L drum cooker and put it together, and even the screws that already come installed, like on the air intake top pieces, the handle, whatever else it is. If you move your cooker a lot, in and out from the garage or wherever it is, if you load yours in the back of the pickup, if you load yours in the trailer like I do and go running up and down the highway to barbecue contests and other events, that will shake these screws loose. So when you are putting yours together, use some Loctite super glue. This stuff works pretty good. It's really pretty easy to apply. You can use any super glue. This just happens to be the Loctite brand. I would not use real Loctite, because then if you ever had to get any of these screws back out again, you'll probably strip them. So just the super glue, something to keep those screws just from shaking back out. Okay, so that takes us to the hinge over here on the back. There. Never take these springs off. They're a pain in the butt if you ever try to put them back on. If you need to take the lid off for some reason, it works pretty good. You can get the lid off and loosen the 4 screws on top. That's also how you adjust how your lid sits. One thing you will want to check every so often is this cap nut right here. That needs to be tightened up. That's another probably good thing to use a little bit of Loctite on that. I don't know if you can see it, but I've already put some on there. That takes a 10mm wrench and a Phillips head on the inside to hold it. Tighten them up until they're good and snug, and then try opening the lid, making sure you don't have it too tight. Again, I'd put Loctite, or some Loctite, some super glue on all of those. Just helps keeping them from backing out. If these screws get loose right here on top, once they get loose and they start wobbling, you'll never get them tightened back up again. So make sure, get some glue on those and keep them tightened up. Okay, so let's talk about temperature management on your K4L drum cooker. First thing, leave your exhaust wide open all the time. There's not much of any other time where I would want to run that half closed, quarter closed, or anything different than just wide open. Okay, on to air intakes. Two major things that you need to keep in mind when talking about temperature management and air intake control. Number one, make very small changes once you have everything kind of running. Number two, give it time to react to that change. Okay. Number one, make small changes. Now this would be about probably where I'd be running at about 300 degrees. Both sides would be this looking the same. Usually when I make adjustments to it, I make adjustments to both sides evenly, as even as I can, at least anyway. So when you go to make adjustments, very small adjustments at a time generally. If I want to get it from 275 to 300, I'm going to adjust about probably that much on both sides. You want to see that again? It's probably about that much. About that much. Like that. And that's about all I'm going to do to give me to make an adjustment. Now with that, again, give it plenty of time to react. At least 15 minutes, if not 30 minutes. I find myself a lot of times coming out, making a little bit of an adjustment, and then run back in, and then run back out, make an adjustment again, and it's only been about 5 minutes. Of course, by the time I realize that, it's up to 320 because I've changed it several times, and now we get into a point where you start chasing yourself. Don't do that. Again, give it plenty of time to react and make small changes. Okay? Our next topic is grease management. First things first, all cookers are going to leak grease somewhere. Somewhere, somehow, grease always finds a way to get outside the cooker. A couple of things that happen that we're discovering here with the K4L drum cookers. Grease runs down the sidewalls here, hits the air intake tube, and then it tends to seep through that mounting hole where your air intake tube goes through, and tends to drip just a little bit. The other place we tend to get leaks is where the drain hole is. This cap, okay, there's the cap off of the bottom of the floor drain. Those threads aren't watertight. Grease gets down on the bottom. You can see there's a little bit of grease in there now. And the grease will work its way up those threads and will drip just a little bit. So the best way to solve that is oil soak. You notice all this stuff around the edges, and around the bottom, that's the oil soak that we put in there to soak up that grease. That takes care of a lot of it. It also makes it a lot easier to clean out. To learn how to do that, go to our video on how to clean out your K4L drum cooker when using the oil soak. If you've got a really nice deck, really nice concrete, you'll notice there's stains out here on my concrete. I kind of don't care as long as I don't get it too bad. But again, if your concrete's really nice, got a really nice deck out there, you will probably want to put some cardboard here underneath your K4L drum cooker. Whatever cooker you have outside, you'll probably want to put some cardboard out there to protect it, or use one of those rubber grill mats. Those work really well. You can scrub these off. The thing I really like about the cardboard, even though it doesn't look as nice, we get done using it, you just throw it away and be done with it. You don't have to worry about washing it off like you do the mats. So you'll probably also want a rubber mat or cardboard or something between the table that you're using out here and the cooker. Again, it's kind of for any grill. because you're going to get grease on the ground at some point. It's going to happen. Grill mats, cardboard, whatever you've got, if you're that worried about it, put something out there to protect your nice deck or your nice concrete. So another thing we've discovered, especially in the winter, wipe this flange off, this seat, make sure the grease is off of there when you're done cooking and before it gets to 20 degrees at night or gets cold, whatever. Because when we close that lid, if not, the grease is going to get cold and kind of basically glue that to this seal that's underneath here. And that seal's just put in with some wire pins. This seal stays really good except when it gets stuck to that frozen grease and you come out here the next morning, jerk the lid open, and you'll have to put this seal back in the lid. Let's talk about rib hangers, extra grates, some of that kind of stuff. Right off the bat, I'll tell you, when they did this first batch, they got the top flange 1/8 of an inch too wide, which means a 1/4 inch we lost across the diameter of it. So it's a 1/4 inch smaller than what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to take a 2.5 inch or 21.5 inch grate, which would account for rib hangers, extra grates, all that stuff. The new ones, they've adjusted that, so we'll be just fine with those. But when we start talking about rib hangers, you know, rib hangers were a good fad several years ago, many years ago, however long it's been. It worked. It was kind of neat. It was kind of cool. Just never was a real big fan of it. Of course, the deal was why everybody was using the rib hangers. That way, they could just hang the ribs in there and they didn't have to worry about it. They just let them run for an hour, hour and a half, however long they were going to let them run until they wrapped. Well, that was part of the reason we did the flame diffuser. The Cyclone flame diffuser. I was doing these years ago when everybody was still hanging yet. The advantage that gives us then is now we're basically to an indirect heat, even though we're still right over the top of that fire. And that also distributes our heat and smoke coming up. So now I can lay ribs on the rack flat and never worry about burning the backs of them. In fact, I've done lots of ribs straight through on here without even foiling them, straight through until they're done, and still didn't burn the backs of them. Because we've got the Cyclone flame diffuser in there taking care of that high heat and that temperature distribution for us. So that is why I never did come up with, we decided not to do rib racks with these. We could have easily done it. It's just another one of those pain in the butt things, and you got to wash the hooks and other stuff. It just, in my opinion, there wasn't any need for them. There still really isn't any need for them. The only good thing about rib racks, you can do 6, 8, 10, 12, however many slabs ribs you want to do. I would not do more than about 8 or 10 if you're hanging. But then you got to figure out what you're going to do with them. If you're going to wrap them and throw them in the oven, wrap them and stack them on here, that's still not a very good way of doing it, but you know, I guess it gets you a whole bunch of ribs done at one time. I'd rather fire up 2 or 3 cookers or take a whole day and cook 4 slabs at a time to get done what I need to do. Okay, let's talk about charcoal management just a little bit. or what are we going to do when you're done cooking? First thing you're going to do when you're done cooking is shut the air intake set off and the exhaust off. That will choke the fire out. Then we can come back and reuse it again the next day. Do not put the cover on until your K4L has cooled. Again, don't put your cover on until your K4L cooker is cooled. Come back out after supper or wait until the next day to put the cover on. Do not roll your K4L into the garage that is attached to the house unless you pulled the charcoal basket out of it and all of the charcoal. If you've got a shed that's not attached to the house, like behind me here, as soon as I'm done cooking, I close the vents and the exhaust and roll it into this shed. It's not going to hurt anything. Always treat charcoal as if it could start a fire at any time. Even though you think you've got the vents closed, it could still start up somehow. I've seen all kinds of things happen with charcoal. You just don't want that in the house. It produces CO2, which is poisonous, and you may not wake up in the morning. So now, when you get ready to cook the next day, or a day after, or whenever it is, you've still got some charcoal left in the charcoal basket, and you've also got ash and some fines. So what we want to do is reach in there, pull that charcoal basket out, shake it out, reload it, drop it back in there, and we can start all over again. So let's do it. So again, treat charcoal as you would treat a gun. You always treat a gun like it's always loaded. You treat charcoal like it can always start a fire at any time. So even though this might have set for 24 hours, 48 hours a week, whatever it is, I'm still going to shake this out. And hopefully get most of it in the bucket, in a galvanized bucket. Then we're going to put the lid on it, and then we're going to leave this galvanized bucket outside. Use some water to put it out, then to make sure everything's out, and then dispose of it properly. So then back over here, we're going to load our basket. There we go. That's some really awful big pieces. If you have some questions on that, you might want to take a look at our video on lump charcoal and natural charcoal briquettes. So we'll take our charcoal basket now and back to the cooker. So now you are ready to light your charcoal, partly from what you used the other day and a little bit of new stuff, and get cooking for today. Just a little bit of a story here about some charcoal management. Some things you need to think about and be safe with. I did the same thing here a while back. Had used the cooker 2 or 3 days previous. I don't remember what it was. Pulled the charcoal basket out, shook it out in the bucket, put some more charcoal in, put it back in the cooker, left the lid open. I did that before lunch so I could come back after lunch in a couple hours, light it and be ready to go. By the time I got back to it about 2 hours later, about half of the charcoal had already burned up. because there was lit charcoal in that basket. That charcoal was hot enough to light all the new charcoal that I just put back in it. So treat every piece of charcoal that you have burned as if it could start a fire anytime, because it can. Do not put your K4L in the garage with the charcoal basket in it. Pull the charcoal basket out, dump it out, and then you can roll the K4L in the garage if the garage is attached. In my sheds that aren't attached, I don't worry about it. But I've seen and heard and know of a lot of personal stories over the years of people traveling with charcoal in their cookers, going home from a barbecue contest, burning trailers down, sleeping and waking up with CO2 poisoning. They were really lucky they got to wake up, and all kinds of things. So just be careful, think a little bit. So with that, that's some of our tips to owning a K4L drum cooker, and we'll be seeing you later for the next one. Bye.